Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jean, the Digital Event Coordinator at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. We are part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges by creating use of technology. Today, I'm very excited to welcome you to join effective board collaboration in a hybrid world with Alexis from Action and Colin from Onboard. Alexis is the current CEO of Action and has a background in both the commercial and not-for-profit social sectors. Prior to his current role, he was the CEO of the Australian branch of Marine Slopes International, MSI, which involved the operation of pharmaceutical company, as well as 17 clinics across Australia. Before Alexis was the Chief Operating Officers of MSI Asia Pacific and Australia with responsibility for regional finance and operations. And also we have Colin here today. He joined Onboard, a global leading board intelligence platform in 2020 to spearhead the Australian presence and lead its expansion. With over 10 years of experience in the board management and governance industry, he has spent the time assisting listed government agencies and non-profit organizations to increase board efficiencies and execute meetings that are much more informed, effective, and uncomplicated. So before we start, we have a little bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type it into the questions box and I'll be here to assist you. If you have any questions during the sections, please also type it into the questions box and they will answer them by the end of the webinar. We really encourage you to ask as many questions as possible to make it very interactive. Please note that your questions will not be appear to the entire group. If you're on Wi-Fi connections, sometimes this can affect the quality of the webinars, so please try to close all the programs to make it to have a best experience. Please note that the webinar is being recorded. The recording and the slides will be sent to you in 1 to 2 business days. And finally, I would like to remind you there's a short survey at the end of the webinar. Please help us to complete for our even better experience in the future. All right, enough for me. Now I would like to hand to Colin and Alexis for today's section. Thank you.
Alexis, firstly, thank you very much for your time this morning to discuss just some of the experiences that you guys had at Action. And I think the main thing that a lot of the attendees and viewers want to hear about is how your experience went from manual practices such as compiling hard copies, either printing or emailing them out, to going to a more centralized collaborative approach with something like Onboard. And I guess it's about the user experience. I think when we spoke about this recently, we were talking about how the board members were valuing the ease of use and things like that. So I think just to introduce things before we go into detail, do you want to talk about the decision to move to a software as a service solution, and secondly, how it is now down the track, because you have had this for some time, obviously.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Colin. Thanks for having me here today. Happy to share the experiences that we've been through. Maybe just some background. I suppose I joined Action 3.5 years ago or so, and after about a year and a half, we, this board pack was we had board meetings monthly, or 10 a year, and this board pack used to come up to a cycle in terms of just as we finished the one, we were starting to prepare the next, and it took a fair amount of the internal team's time to do this. So we started setting up meetings just about after the board meeting is over for the next board meeting in terms of what do we need to do for the next pack, and putting everything together. And and I looked at brought it up with IT to say, well, surely we could look at a different solution to this in terms of one, us putting it together, and two, having the board access it easily enough on time or prior. And I first of all got a little bit of resistance from IT saying, well, it's an additional system. We've got SharePoint. Why don't we use SharePoint? But board members have access to this. We can give them a dedicated cloud space, which we do. And there's all reasons why we didn't need to subscribe to some new software and additional passwords. And this is going to be an additional barrier, and they're going to forget their passwords, and it's a different logon. Anyway, I heard it all, but and at first I absorbed it after a year and a half. I said, no, it's fine. And then we came across this system at quite a low barrier price point of view. So saying, well, brought IT back on board again, had a presentation, and the initial comment that I made is just our internal staff time to put our board pack together costs us more than what this is worth for a year. So let's give it a go. And IT were on board with that. Taking that argument on board to say, well, yeah, that's probably a valid concern, and it far exceeded my expectations in terms of how much time it actually saved. When we had our first meeting, we had a coordinator who used to be able to try and put packs together. Then you get an Excel sheet and it's a PDF, and then put the pack together, and it's got to be done by a certain date. And then somebody realizes 3 days before, oh, we want this additional paper, or a change in the paper was wrong. And this person then used to have to put the pack together again, PDF it again, page numberings and everything used to change. And then the reference in the material was sometimes on page 7 wasn't true anymore. So all of that just vanished. And it was quite amazing to see and progress. First of all, people could just add administrators in terms of the preparation for the board pack, could add at their own time. Sure, we have dates where we want to be done, and then we publish to the board when we want to. And with any new additions or changes, that automatically just gets put through the system, and the board gets notified to say, an additional paper has been added, and this is an update, or the old paper was wrong. And so it's really just massively changed the way we prepare board packs, from say 20 hours per board meeting in terms of preparation to maybe 2 to 3 hours in terms of collected time. So yeah, so that is the biggest saving in terms of that consuming time. And I didn't even envisage that would actually happen, to be honest. So that was just almost an added bonus. The real point behind it was around the fact that the board could easily access a system. The concern around users forgetting their logins and password, that just vanished. That just never happened. If somebody does forget their password, there's a system which IT department has never been contacted for any ask on passwords or usernames or anything like that. So that was a myth that just vanished and never materialized. So far, smooth sailing. I think we've had 1 or 2 small requests, and they've been addressed or changes. So it seems quite adaptable. I don't know. Maybe I've gone too much detail there, Colin. Just stop me if I'm going off course.
No, it's really good. And then what about with COVID hitting, how did that change the environment for you guys?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first thing is just to note, we've always had a board which has been both remote and virtual. So we essentially have 6 or 7 board meetings a year, and we try and do those 2 face-to-face, and the remaining are virtual. The virtual ones are usually shorter, so 2 hours, where the face-to-face would be a full day. Having the system obviously just enhanced the virtual experience, so it made it easier, and particularly for the longer meetings, while we did split them into 2 4-hour meetings just because people get Zoom fatigue. It was easy enough to link the meetings on the system to recognize that they're all part of the same meetings, but they are split. And the board just latched on to already having the software and used to the software was an easy move for them just to carry on. I mean, we'd still like to have the face-to-face ones, but I think then what we noticed, even the first one when we started, and we've been using On Board, I think for must be close to 2 years now. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, and even when we did have a face-to-face with the On Board system, I did find that while some people still like the idea of this hard pack and paper-based, a lot of the board members were just using their iPads. A lot of them did have iPads, or they bring their computers with, and just instead of printing out all the documents.
And then tell us, so obviously in terms of preparation, it's created a lot of efficiency. Is the rumor true that sometimes you go in as CEO to adjust the papers yourself as well?
Say that I didn't get that part. That the last part is the rumor true.
I heard that you go in and can correct the papers and add some more material, so you've got admin access yourself as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So while people put in documents and they do, at least you've got access to be able to see what people are putting in, when they're putting it in. If you don't like it, you can action it before it gets published, or even if it's published, you can still action and correct something, which is great, or addition to or change something. That's a huge plus to see transparency about what's going in, and quite early.
And that collaboration, preparing it all, where you can just go home on your Mac computer and just make a few quick changes, and then you're comfortable with it, and then the other person does their bit, and then you're ready to publish.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, as I said, to me, as I said at the start, the time saving and putting it together, where people can just put documents in. I mean, we used to have one person who just used to try and glue the PDF together, of the 15 different papers and Excel and this and that, and plus the agenda, who used to take at least 10-15 hours every single board meeting, because there would be last minute changes, or they'd have to wait and chase up somebody, and I can't put the pack together because I'm still waiting for somebody to, whereas now we can just get through that without having to even think about that.
Yeah. And then what about the fact that there's less email traffic, there's less printing and things like that? How is that being accepted on the user side? So we've talked about the preparation, the administrative side. What about now the user experience? Like, what do the board members think of moving on to this, and what are their feelings? Are they comfortable with it? Like, what's some of the good and bad positions that you've heard from the end user?
Yeah. I mean, I think the board members, and we were a little bit nervous just from, you've got different ranges of technical experience. Our board is primarily clinicians, so doctors and specialists, and they're used to working in a clinic or a GP practice. They're not always behind a computer and doing things. So I kind of did like a little bit concerned, while some of them are a little bit more new age and they're used to the idea. Some of them weren't. Some of them were a bit older, and I must say we haven't really had any negative feedback. I think once or twice right at the start, just getting used to how do I open the software, but it was fairly self-explanatory. There was initially maybe a concern, I think, do I link it, the Zoom meeting through the software as opposed to the calendar? And we clarified that. We just go through our normal calendar invites, and then you open up the software separately, and that sorted out any issues there. And they were really happy with that, because they just got a bit confused about what to do at the start with that respect. But overall, the feedback's been really positive. They like getting the packs always in one place. They don't have to trail through emails. They don't have to find out if there's a newer version. There's no discrepancy about even when they open it on the day, that is the latest version. So there's no dispute around that. A lot of our board members are last minute board members, so they click onto the link and then they see it and they go through it. They like having the readability in terms of open book, where you can scroll down in the agenda and you can go straight to where you are in the pack. So it's before, in our previous versions, because we sometimes there were multiple versions of PDFs and the page numbers were a bit different. People sometimes, like, where are you? We just haven't had any of that discussion at all. And actually, that's the first time I've thought about that now, that hasn't come up in a board meeting again, just to somebody being lost about where we are in the pack. Everybody knows where we are, whether it's page number or agenda item. You know, that's the first time I thought about that. Actually, now that was a conversation 2 years ago, where people often got confused about where we are. So the feedback from the board members has all been good. I can't think of anybody that said no, it doesn't work, or they want to go back to any other system. You know, in fact, quite the opposite. And just internally, we also use Onboard for multiple internal meetings. So our senior management team, for example, are all attend the board meeting, so they all are users anyway. So we started using it for senior management team meetings, and started playing around and exploring a bit more. So for example, the minute taking function started 6 months ago, and it's taken off. We want to move that to the board meeting as well, because it actually works and everything's there. The action items are easily copied and pasted. It's all in one place, so we don't ever have to look and see where it's stored in a directory somewhere else and has somebody sent out the minutes. It's you know, it's all designated at the time of the meeting. It's updated straight away. Anybody can go and update and change the minutes real time if they don't like them once they're published. Yep. So it's just so not just from the board side of it, we've started to use it internally, and also just looking and thinking about, obviously it's a question and balance of how many licenses we get, but you know, could we roll it out to some other committee or subcommittee meetings where they aren't board members, and is it worthwhile doing that or not? So that's definitely under discussion.
And then what about like things like charters, policy documents, historical information like past board papers, past minutes? Are they utilizing the resource area and the search functionality in there? Do you have any sort of commentary bits on all the historical information?
Look, it's way easier to find. So I like the way I do it anyway, is that we classify each of the meetings as it's a board meeting. I think it's a green dot, and if it's a senior management team, it's got a red dot. I don't know what it all means, but it's all fairly easy for me to find. And we clone a meeting. So once you've got the one meeting, you just kind of clone it, and it keeps the same settings and format. So then if I'm looking just for my senior management team meetings, I get a list of them and I search by that, and I can always link back and find documents. So multiple times I've rather found documents there that as opposed to our SharePoint, because my SharePoint's a bit of a nightmare to try and find. And if I just want to try and find that presentation that I did to the senior management team, I know it's there, and I can go look and find it in the onboard system quite easily. And I suppose it's also, I mean, look, we've been cautious, obviously. What I say, it's a year and a half, 2 years. We've kept board minutes copies of that, because it's easy to from the system. You can easily just download a PDF of it, and then I would store the PDF elsewhere in our SharePoint, just anyway. Not that we use that as a search function, though. I just first go to Onboard if I'm trying to find minutes of a board meeting a year ago. That's my first port of call, and I always find it there first. I suppose for a backup that I've got it there just in case Onboard disappears. But that's a big risk. Yeah. And
then just moving on to a different situation, how do you feel that Onboard's helped you in terms of making decisions and stuff? Do you think it has an added value in terms of what we always say is that Onboard keeps you on message outside of the meetings? Do you feel that the level of engagement from the board members has improved a bit, or have you not? What are your thoughts on that?
I suppose it gives you a structure in terms of trying to set, because you've got one system which shows, I suppose, your schedule of meetings and events that you have. So we're kind of a bit more structured to know that we have a senior management team meeting, which should be before an FRMA meeting, which needs to be before a board meeting. So it does kind of help lay out the layout of what what's expected in terms of how.
Yeah.
And it's just easier, again, to see in one system as opposed to using your Outlook and it's transparent, I suppose. So the board members can also see, there was an FRMA the week before, and they could have access to the FRMA papers if they wanted to have a look at them, which we would give them because they are entitled to that. So while I haven't consciously thought, yes, it's made a difference to the way we do things, it has, because it's just it's implied, I suppose, that it's all transparent and it's all in one place. So there's yeah. So again, something I didn't think of necessarily, but it does keep you kind of honest to that system, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, and some of the things that we've just introduced in the software are things like meeting feedback. So whilst we've only just released it, meeting feedback also allowed the board members to give the administrators feedback as to how they found the meeting and if there was anything they thought needed improvement. So we're definitely allowing a lot more for collaboration coming through rather than the pure function of publishing a paper.
Well, that's good
really
to know.
good.
I didn't realize that was added function, so I'll look out for that, because I did think, I'd like to just do a quick survey to the board whether it's, do they get the papers in time? Is there anything they want to talk about the meeting? So, I mean, that's maybe that could be used there. Yeah, good to know. Thanks.
Okay. And then where do you think the next step is in terms of the board with technology? Because we talk about getting people to immerse themselves with a lot more things, like you're hearing a lot more data coming through. There's AI in a lot of businesses now. Obviously, all the tech companies are doing some incredible things. What would your thought be as in the next step of how to lift the board in terms of technology and where you'd like it to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just thinking about what the prior conversation around feedback, but I think what'd be good for the system or for the board is some sort of evaluation in terms of board effectiveness or board effectiveness surveys being online or on the system, so they could actually rate themselves. I'm talking about their skills and what they bring to the board. So I think that could be something good for technology-wise, where the board could go with self-assessment, I suppose, in some sort of way through some sort of technology system. I don't know how much of the system, and again, as I say, as with everybody, we're always busy with our jobs and roles, and you always want to find out more what the software can do, and I'm sure there's 10 functions there that are there that I don't even know are there. So every now and then I kind of think, I need to find out more about that. But whether technology in terms of something like this system gives feedback on reports on how many board members attended which meetings, or percentages of what they missed, how engaged they were at the board, especially when you're doing it virtual, it'd be great to be able to measure how much they speak or not, or do things. I think that would be useful. I mean, we don't use, the board members have been a bit of a slow adoption in terms of things like annotations. So I think there's those types of technology, which is probably already there, that they haven't fully utilized and used yet. So it's slow steps, but I think there's definitely opportunities in looking at that. And the other thing was just general surveys. I think would be great to get more information from the board anonymously if they felt more comfortable as well.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because some of those things like the skill matrices are all coming in terms of new development. So it's in our pipeline. However, I thought I'd just quickly show everyone today a meeting I created, and this does have the feedback in here. So we can go in and turn the feedback on by configuring it. But I'm just going to go in here and just show you a couple of things in terms of the meeting. So here's the meeting as an administrator. So even if you're looking at this as a director, we do have in here the analytics. And the analytics is already here for the users of the system, where we can show you things like the meeting metrics, how many agenda items there are, how many pages, the invitees, and then we show some really good data. And here's an interesting thing. Out of the 9 invitees, 21% have viewed the meeting, but only 14% have actually opened the book. So whilst it doesn't name who these individuals are, you understand that across that number of invitees, that not many have done that. And then if we receive feedback, the feedback would come through here, and it's really clean. It's like the 5-star rating, and then they can write some things in there. But this is the bit that I think everyone finds extremely impressive, and that is the book section views. So you can see here a document called Call to Order, the time spent 3 minutes. But as we move through, this consent agenda has had 23 annotations across the committee, 24 views, and the time spent 21 minutes. So what this does, it's data for all the users. And I've had a number of people comment at how impressive this is, because it's taking the board members to that next level. They can see all of this. And so what happens as a collective group, they can say, okay, so if we're not getting everyone's engagement, or if people are not reading a particular paper, do we need to consider the way that we're presenting the paper? Do we need to then ask the board or the committee, what do we need to do to get people to read this? But this, these analytics are in Onboard and can be accessed. It's a separate module, but we certainly can show people how that all works. And in terms of in training and things like that, we've got an incredible customer success team, and the customer success manager can show you all the extra things that's in the system. So although I've just showed you a little bit of the analytics, the main thing I wanted to show you here is how we're moving forward with some of the data that we're collecting. And then in terms of surveys and questionnaires, the system does have an area to do things like board evaluation. So I'll just quickly show you a board evaluation survey. The nice thing about the board evaluation is you can have radio buttons, you can have slider buttons, you can have text boxes. I'll just show you a quick example in the system. So here's a really simple board evaluation. As we go down, people can answer by clicking the radio button. And then if they want to put in feedback, they can put in feedback, and then the survey responses can be collated. So that's just some basics there in that regard.
That's amazing. Thanks, Colin. I didn't realize that analytics part existed at all. I just recently, actually this morning, I had a senior management team meeting where I used, and I noticed yesterday the feedback button I'd never seen before. So is that just a recent release on that?
Yeah, so the feedback button is really new. In fact, we only just released it at the end of last month. So it's still yeah, it's still new, and I think the training is coming through. So here's the feedback where we can do that to all the meeting attendees. And then they just have the 5 stars. They can click on whether they thought it was an excellent meeting or whether it was poor, and then put the feedback in. So it's super new. I know that we're running out some training for some existing clients in the coming weeks, because it was only just released. So the meeting feedback is huge, and really does help people a lot. Just whilst we're in the system, whether you're an administrator or a board user, this is what the board book will look like when you log in via a computer. The great thing about Onboard is you can use it on all devices. So obviously computers, MacBooks, iPads, Android devices. If I go through and scroll down the board book, just for all the attendees' benefit, you can see the pack here, the page numbering is there, and you can see I've already put some annotations on. If I wanted to put some more annotations on, really easy to do that. I'll just show you some simple annotations like scribbling, highlighting, and then if people want to write some text in here. So then you can see the annotation summary, which on a computer can also be moved over to here. And then you can see the breakdown here between the different agenda items. So here's the minutes and our annotations there. And as we come through the consent agenda, and it's all listed there. So if we need to find something quickly, I can just click on it and it'll take me straight to that page. But I'm going to go to the next slide. So obviously, ASHM's there in the centre in terms of some of the organisations that are using Onboard. There's a few American organisations there. The one that I talk about a lot, obviously with Connecting Up, all the Connecting Up members have exceptional pricing because it's a philanthropic thing that we do to help a lot of youth charities there. But I talk about Robinhood a lot to people. For those who don't know Robinhood, certainly Google it. You've probably heard that Commonwealth Bank yesterday has started doing cryptocurrencies. Robinhood was like a ComSec in the US, but that started doing cryptocurrencies as well, and is one of our users there. And then there's a lot of Australian companies that you can see in here, big and small. People like Chief Executive Women have come from some very expensive software platforms to Onboard and are much better off. So there's so many organisations that have benefited from this. I haven't talked about the software back end, but I will cover a little bit about the back end in terms of security. And in terms of security, and I'll cover that before I talk about what next year is looking like. The security is in Microsoft Azure. So it's hosted in Australia and it's ISO 27001 accredited, it's SOC 2 accredited. A lot of our original clients in the United States for finance and credit unions. So it does have what we call banking level security. You can go to really detailed lengths if you want high security, such as two-factor authentication, things like that. But then next year, in terms of things that we're releasing, you can see on that slide there, I've covered the total meeting views, but there's a lot more data and stuff coming out from there in terms of meeting views and book views. And so there's a lot of that stuff that we've shown today, which is getting, there's a lot more functionality coming through there. The terms and roles is already released, but we'll do a lot more training on that. I probably would like to quickly just show everybody that because I think it's a really cool area. So in the directory, this is where you add your members. So to add a new person to the system, it's really simple. On the top right, you just click add members, put their Christian name, surname, email address and role, and then that sends a professional email to them and steps them through a wizard on how to get into Onboard. And then groups is where you can set up your committees. You can set your committees on the fly. You can see here in this site, I've got a number of committees. I've even set up a social committee. But then roles and terms is a really nice way to see if you've got a lot of committees, you can see when people's terms are up. So in this example here, you can see most people's terms have been renewed, but we know that this individual here, Peter Roberts, his term on the risk committee will be ending and we'll need to consider renewing it. So it is a nice graphical view, especially if there's a lot of succession and changing of committees, then you'll find this a really efficient way when a new person comes through to have a platform where the data is all here and accessible. I think that's it from my discussion. Jean, do you want to just jump in and maybe facilitate if there are any questions?
For sure. Thank you very much, Alexis and Colin. It's a really fruitful discussion. And then I really like the way that we interact like each other, so that I'm sure most of the audience got lots of takeaway from this lovely webinar. All right, so let's see if there's any questions from the audience. Don't be shy. And there's no silly questions. So you can just ask whatever you wish. And the questions will not be pop up to the entire group, so that you can just ask whatever you wish.
I think while the questions are coming in, I will say that if you are considering looking at onboard, we can get you up and running fairly quickly. And when I say fairly quickly, we can have you on a trial site within 24 hours, which you can roll out for your next board meeting, completely free, complimentary. And then once your board members have used it for the first meeting, if they love it, which they will, then you can look at and maybe signing a purchase agreement. So we believe that the proof is in how the end users react to the system. And so without making a commitment to trial it, you can just put it in, run the meeting out of it, and if they don't like it, then just hand it back.
Okay, sounds great. So maybe Colin, later on you can flip me the link, and then maybe I can put that into the follow-up email. So if anyone interested to get a free trial, feel free to go to that link and then just complete just a little details, I guess, and then you can just get it on.
Fantastic.
Yeah, because after this webinar, we are going to send you not only the presentation deck, but also the recording of today's sections. So all of you will be getting that in 1 to 2 business days. So I guess the presentation is very clear to everyone. That's why there's not a lot of questions today. Would you have anything to add before we finish?
No, I think, Jean, firstly, I'd just like to thank Mr. Alexis Apostolellis at Asham for his time today to share his experiences with everyone. It's really valuable to hear everything that's going on and their user experience, because that's the most important thing. Otherwise, I just think if you send out that information, Jean, to everyone, if they've got any questions, it's easy for them to come through to us and we can help them.
Of course, fantastic.
Yeah.
So
just
before
we
finish,
just to reiterate, I was just going to say, just to reiterate, certainly for us, it's been a positive experience, saved us time, and I'm glad Colin convinced me to give it a try for our organization, because yeah, definitely everyone's on board and the board members love it as well. So really recommend it.
Lovely, thank you for that. All right, before we finish, as you can see the screen now, there's a little bonus for you guys who attended to the webinar today. We got a really lovely sections for it on 24th of November, that's this month. So it's a Mastering LinkedIn series. So it's a 4 sections. So each week you're gonna learn something about the LinkedIn. So nowadays it's not only about having a profile, it's about like how to grow your profiles, how to make good use of it, to link others people, do advertising. And it's basically for the business, for not-for-profit organizations. So I would say that it is a very comprehensive course for you to learn the in-depth about LinkedIn. So if you're interested, feel free to register. This information will be shown in the follow-up email as well. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Colin, Alexis, for today's sections. And thanks, everyone, for attending today. And we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.